The Trans-Canada Trail is the longest multi-use trail system in the world, winding more than 28,000 kilometers from sea to sea to sea. It is also the unifying concept behind a new collection of stories set in every province and territory of the country from authors at various stages of their writing careers. Here to talk about Not the Same Road Out Trans-Canada Stories is editor Kilmeny Denny. Welcome.
Thank you, John. It's good to be here.
Kilmeny, I wanted to know what goes into curating a collection like this. What do you look for in a good story?
Well, a good short story can be any genre, any style. I was very open to the submissions, but it has to be a good story. It has to engage the reader from the very beginning, has to draw you into the characters, and it has to be very succinct that every word, every phrase tells more than what's just on the page, that the reader can intuit enough a sufficiency of the lead character's backstory or the situation or the environment. And a lot of people, we are basically an incubator press. So we work a lot with new authors and new writers who have very limited experience in publishing. And we always say that the technique can be easily addressed, but the essence of understanding good storytelling or how to tell a story is something that's almost innate. Some people have a feel for it, some people don't. So that's what I was looking for. I was essentially looking for good storytelling that was, of course, tied to place because this is a book that has been selected based on place, on each province and each territory. So that's
Now,
what I was looking for.
as we mentioned in the introduction, this book contains pieces by authors in various stages of their writing careers, and you just described Tidewater as sort of an incubator press. So, how do you go for a mix of proficiencies and experience levels to sort of showcase the range of development among the writers?
Well, no, we didn't intend to get a mix of really experienced writers with junior writers. We opened up the call, and we were very fortunate that in we got some good stories to begin with, but we discovered that it's a bit of a straitjacket when you've set yourself a premise that there's got to be a good story from each province and territory. Because initially, after our first call, we had some big gaps. We got no submissions at all from Manitoba, no submissions from Nova Scotia, no submissions from Prince Edward Island, and none of it was a challenge as well. So what the second page and stage of calling out for stories was to contact writers groups in those specific provinces saying, look, we're trying to do so can you we're trying to get submissions. We also did some research on some writers, Canadian authors that we knew of in the province, in those respective provinces or territories, and approached them directly. So, for example, Sayward Goodhand, we didn't have anybody from Manitoba, so I reached out to her directly and said, look, we're doing this. It's a very small collection. We're small publishers. Any possibility you might have a story sitting on the shelf that would fit the remit. And we were thrilled when she came back. And Patrick Woodcock from Nunavut, we reached out to him because of his connections with teaching literacy in the territory. And so I thought, well, maybe he might have a student or someone he'd been mentoring who might be suitable. And he came back and said, well, what about me? I have a story. I've been working on it for a while. I'd love to could participate. So that's how we managed to get some of the people who are more established to participate. But we have two people who are both currently creative writing students. our writer from Newfoundland and our writer from Prince Edward Island. And so for them, it's their first time being published. And for a number of other authors, it's their first or one of their first times of appearing in a trade published book.
Now, let's talk about the title, Not the Same Road Out, based on a poem that opens the set. The road in is not the same road out. I sort of take that to mean that as a comment on the transformations that characters can go through in a story. Kind of like the old saying, you can't step in the same river twice. Am I somewhat on the right track there?
You are. We started off because, we didn't just want to call this Trans Canada Stories. We wanted something a little bit. So we thought, well, maybe something from a poem about nature or celebrating nature. So we went through and the publisher came up with some suggestions. And I said, but these are all American poets or British poets. I want a Canadian poet. And I happen to have, you can't see back, I have a whole shelf of poetry books, and one was a collection of Karen Solis poems, and so I picked this up, and she is perhaps the greatest living Canadian poet at the moment, and I came across this poem that was, I think, originally published in 2011. It's not a new poem, and it's certainly not one we commissioned. Not the same, the road in is not the same road out. And when I read it, I thought, yes, there's something about this poem that captures the feeling of a personal, emotional journey as well as a physical one. There's the ambiguity, and I just felt it was absolutely perfect for the book. And so I liked the just taking half the title of the original poem, and I approached her to ask her permission to use the part of her poem's title as the title of our book. And then I also said, by any chance, do I have to go through your agent? I think it would make a lovely introduction to the book if we could reprint the poem. And she very kindly said, oh, yeah, well, we won't go through my agent. You can just do it with me directly. So that's how Karen became involved. And that's how the title of the book came. Because I felt very strongly I wanted it to be 100% Canadian.
Now, the first story in the book, Field Notes on Cryptids, is set in Ontario, but to me, it has less to do with cryptids or field notes than about revisiting an adolescent love triangle many years later and the betrayal and the falling apart of a friendship. What did you take away from this story?
Well, I thought it was so apt and so clever of Anne to situate it on a section of the Trans-Canada Trail that's actually known as the Friendship Trail, because this story was all about friendship and how friendships and things that happen to us and the people we know when we're teenagers can affect us for our whole life. Because it starts off with, that she is still obsessed by this couple that she knew, and her husband can't understand it and says, look, the husband knows this reunion is probably not going to go well. But the other thing is that we see very much, again, it's a very clever story because we see from her perspective how the resentments and how she feels partially betrayed by these people that she loved really as friends. But there is a subtext there that's very clever, and underneath is that from the perspective of these two friends is that perhaps our narrator wasn't the angel and innocent party 100% that she portrays herself to be. So I liked that ambiguity in it as well. And I thought it was a very strong story. It was one of the first stories that we received as for our call to submission, and instantly I liked it right away. And it needed very little work because Anne Baldo is an extremely good writer. She's already had one collection of short stories published, and believes she's got a new book coming out next year as well.
Another story, Invasive Species, set in the Northwest Territories. Full disclosure, It was written by a colleague, Lillian Au. I couldn't help but notice her news background coming through in the detail of the writing. Did that come across to you as well?
Yeah, Lily and I worked quite extensively on that story. So that story is not quite the same as the one she first submitted. So we kind of worked on it and massaged it. We know Lillian from because she's been published in one of our other anthologies, Upon a Midnight Clear, which is part of the Better Next Year trilogy of true life Christmas and holiday stories, and she contributed for that. But I think what I liked about Lillian is the fact that she knows the territory very well. She knows the Northwest Territory. So that sense of place and that intimate knowledge of the kind of people who live there and inhabit that space is it's firsthand, and that immediacy comes across. And to me, never having been to the Northwest Territories, I felt that I had a sense of place reading her story. And I know that you know the area as well, and I hope that that came across to you as
Now,
well.
I like the premise of it. It's a hunting guide who has a change of heart about wild pigs after a pig valve is implanted into his heart and saves his life without
Yeah.
giving too much away. What was there a lot of work hammering that out?
No, that was something that Lillian came up. It wasn't, it was in the original story. It was just how it was handled. But I liked the shift to this almost, it's a near future disaster story, really, because it's the pigs coming in and the pigs are the invasive species. But we learn very quickly by reading the story and without give any spoilers on how it ends, is that in essence, we are the invasive species in the pristine north. It's the humans that have invaded nature and caused all the problems that lead to the disaster depicted in the story, the
We are.
environmental disaster. So I liked the double entendre of the title, and I liked the idea of too of this shift that Bjorn, the hunting guide, it starts his shift to becoming disillusioned with his way of life is when he's the hunting trip that opens the story when he all of a sudden it just he loses interest in it. He loses faith in it. He doesn't want to see another animal die. And then when he has goes back and has the heart attack and has the pig's valve, that cements what's a change in him that's already started. And I'd like to say that, you can just tell from the way we're talking about this story that these are short stories, but they're very dense. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot to be got from each of them.
Of course, I can't ignore a story that is set in British Columbia, Bill Engelson's Roadside Reunion. This one strikes me as a coming of age tale about a young man who's sent to live in a wilderness reformatory camp rather than a juvenile prison, looking at his evolving sense of himself, his relationship with his mother. But like many of these stories, although dense, as you say, it ends abruptly and it leaves the reader wanting more, at least this reader. Is that kind of by design?
It is because you do kind of want to know what's going to happen to our young hero when he does go back. And it's kind of a sad story because it doesn't bode well. The roadside reunion when he hasn't seen his mother for almost a year, and he gets driven down the track from the wilderness camp to meet at a picnic bench at a roadside lay-by. And you get the sense that he's got something from his year, but not enough. And I think that Bill worked for years and years and years in family services as a social worker. So this story is drawn very much from his personal experience of dealing with exactly this kind of case, because the mother has not been a good mother. The son has a really, he's got a chip on his shoulder, but you can see where it comes from. And I think that to try and put more into that story and to take us further into his journey, you can't really do it within the confines of a short story. I think that's it's a snapshot. We get their backstory. We see the two of them being reunited, and it's told very much from the perspective of the young man. So I think he's a teenager. He doesn't know what it's going to be. He just knows he wants to get the heck out of his wilderness camp and get back, back to town and back to his normal life. Will he be going, mugging old ladies and stealing their purses in the streets again? Maybe. And I think that's what the message we get from this story is that he's been in the system for a year, and has it really been effective? And I think the takeaway for readers is not very,
One of my
which is a
observations
tragedy.
from this story and from the other stories in the book is that these seem like little worlds unto themselves, and just as you begin to navigate them, the story is over.
Well, I suppose I mean, that's why I think some people are not fans of short stories. They want to get into something that they can see the whole progression, the way it goes through. But I think that each one, I would say, I think each one ends, in my opinion, at the right point. But I would say that, wouldn't I? 'Cause I'm the editor.
Well, I mean, I don't mean it necessarily as a criticism. I think with the short story form, there's a tension there with with the way the plot is laid out, and then the reveal, and then leaving the reader wanting more is not necessarily a bad thing. What do you hope people get out of the book?
I hope that people get out of this book a strong sense of place and the essential Canadianness of this of the stories, that they are, and the variety of characters and styles are just, I hope that comes across as well. I mean, say, where do I mention, hers is a dystopian erotic fantasy set in Winnipeg in the future, so, and then we have, we have Bev Vincent's story of the journey back, someone who's lived away from home for so many years, who returns back to New Brunswick to scatter his wife's ashes, who wasn't even a Canadian, but he felt it's important to go back. So I hope that people find the stories enjoyable and appreciate the space, the locations, and in its little way, they're not stories about the Trans-Canada Trail. I had to keep sort of putting that emphasis to people who submitted stories. I even had a lot of stories about the Trans-Canada Highway, and I said, no, it's the Trans-Canada Trail, not the highway. That they weren't supposed to be travelogues. They weren't supposed to be nature stories. They were supposed to be stories about people and journeys and traveling. And the trail, the various segments of the trail, are is the setting for the stories.
The name of the book is Not the Same Road Out, Trans-Canada Stories. It is published by Tidewater Press. My thanks to author Kilmeny Denny.
My pleasure. Thank you.